Hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast. My name is Matt Edmondson and it is great to be with you on what can only be described as a very cold day at the time of recording. It is a little bit chilly, I'm not going to lie, but it's good to be with you. I hope you're doing well. I hope life and business is good. If you are new to the show, we did the title kind of explains what we talk about. We talk about e-commerce, all things to do e-commerce. It's a show we've been doing since 2019. Can you believe it? This is our 7th year doing the show. And so a very warm welcome to you if this is your first time with us. And of course, many people listen to the show time and time again, and it's great to have you back if you're a regular listener. A very, very warm welcome to you guys as well. Just love the fact you keep coming back. Genuinely enables me to keep having these great conversations, which we're going to be having today again with people like Jeff. So thank you for sticking around. If you want to know more about the show, more what we get up to, there is a website. You can see all the past episodes on there. Archive. You can search by topic. I mean, it's just singing, that website at the moment. Go to ecommercepodcast.net. Go check that out. And of course, if you haven't done so already, check out Cohort, which is our monthly call. It's a group that we have with a bunch of e-commerce entrepreneurs from around the world. We all get together, different calls, different time zones. It's all good fun, all international. We all run e-com businesses, and we all talk about e-commerce. We talk about the challenges that we're facing, and we just all help each other out. And it's a beautiful thing, and it's totally free. And if you would like to find out more about that, go to the website. Just click on the Cohort link. It kind of explains it in a bit more detail. But yeah, come join us in Cohort. It will be great to see you there. Now, that's enough from me rabbiting on. Jeff, welcome to the show, man. How are we doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. I
Oh, no,
appreciate
it's
it.
great to have you all the way from sunny Florida. Is it sunny,
Yes,
actually? I just
it
assume it's
is. It
sunny.
is sunny. I won't even tell you the temperature.
I wouldn't
But
understand it anyway, Jeff.
I took the garbage out in shorts and a t-shirt this morning.
Yeah, I would say I did the same thing, but I genuinely didn't. So it was great to have you. Jeff, for those that might not know, just explain a little bit about who you are, what you do, what you get up to, and why you're on the show.
So we're on the show today to talk about a new product that we developed over the course of last year. It's last year now. Interesting. First time I've said that. Called Quick Refund. We sort of identified a gap in the market, in the e-commerce market. There's been a pretty significant tightening, on all sides in terms of refunds and chargebacks and stuff like
Yeah,
that. And we sort of stumbled into something that seems to be working out very well. It's sort of a new trusted third party that sits in between the banks and the merchants and the consumers. And we've been at it now we've been at it for over a year, but we went live in the fall, and we're doing well. We're excited about it, and we're excited to talk about it.
fantastic. Fantastic. And of course, this is something that affects everyone in e-commerce because we all take money. At least I think that's the general rule of an e-commerce business is you take money for a product or a service. So we're going to be talking about all of these things. So great to have you, Jeff. I think these are the kind of topics that we don't really talk about, is my experience. Everyone likes to talk about email marketing or whatever the latest trend is. But if you, I mean, with chargebacks, refunds, payment processing, all that sort of stuff with e-commerce, if you could wave a magic wand and solve one key problem that you see customers facing time again and again and again, what would that problem be, and why?
I think the issue generally is that there's no central repository for information. The issuers have their information, the processors have theirs, the merchants have theirs, and the consumers have their confirmation emails or whatever it is. But I think a lot of the issues and the problems that we're trying to solve are based upon the fact that everybody is really working from a different database, so to
Right.
speak. It's it's not that interests aren't aligned. I think that interests are aligned largely. It's that everybody is sort of backed into their own corner and sees these issues from their own perspective. And when that happens, there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blaming and and because there are multiple ways that you can resolve these things, it just becomes overcomplicated. And like a lot of things, I mean, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. It seems like a lot of the efforts to try to clean things up, at least in the short term, tend to make them more complex and more difficult. And I think that's the situation that we're in now. And I think those are the kinds of problems that we're trying to solve.
It's interesting listening to you talk about this because what I've noticed, I think, over the years in e-commerce is um, we sort of go down a path. We find a whole bunch of problems, and then somebody somewhere fixes that problem, right? And then you move on, and you get to the next problem. And so, but perhaps the most obvious one was shipping, and the ability to ship quickly. In the UK, especially, I mean, I know you know the UK, but in the UK, there was only one. There was a Royal Mail. There was a few other bits and bobs, but nothing significant. You had the Royal Mail, and now, um, 10 years later, one of the things that you can say e-commerce has done, everything now ships quicker and easier,
Mhm.
and there's a system in place that just makes that whole thing, usually, not all the time, but usually, work. With payments, it kind of feels like the systems that we were using perhaps in 2005, they're not too dissimilar to what you have now. You have an internet merchant account. There seems to be now a few key players that have emerged. Maybe the obvious one being Stripe. You have these sort of payment providers. But other than things like Apple Pay, maybe Google Pay, I don't know if there's been any major innovation that I can point to. Am I remembering the history well here, or am I missing something?
No, I think you've got it right. And I think that for that entire time period, I mean, I've been in it since 1998. And I will tell you, like, since 1998, people have been trying to come up with a replacement to the credit card, for
Mm,
online transactions. I think the stable coin is now, sort of the big mover, at least in terms of, overall publicity and things like that.
yeah,
Crypto sort of had its chance. There were a lot of people that were trying to do that, but it's difficult to get much traction with a currency that less than 1% of the people in the world
yeah,
have any of.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there is, the thing about payments is that there has been, it is, you're exactly right. It's largely the same now as it always has been. I mean, we were in the payment gateway business, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and that was a period of, we passed the first CVV transaction ever in the history of the
Right,
world.
right,
We did the first verified by Visa
right.
transaction ever in through our
Yeah,
gateway.
yeah,
um, we sort of piled up, I think, 11 or 12 different firsts in just a couple of years because there were so many issues that were identified as soon as we started trying to accept payments on the internet. Um, but then, really, around 2006, 7, 8, things sort of stabilized from
mm,
a technology standpoint. There's been no new CVV. There's been no new verified by Visa. No new sort of fraud prevention or security based platforms. We're all just dealing with the same stuff. I think the issuers have gotten a lot more sophisticated, right? The issuers understand a lot more about our patterns as individuals.
yeah,
And so rather than, the merchants being burdened with, sort of figuring out where the potential problems are, the issuers are now doing that on behalf of their cardholders as opposed to the merchants and doing it on behalf of themselves.
yeah,
Um, but it's but disputes are largely the same now as they have been since I got into the business, almost 30 years ago.
yeah,
You have two choices. You can either call the merchant and ask for your money back, or you can call the bank and tell them to tell the merchant to give you your money back,
yeah.
or just get it back from the bank, and then the bank takes it from the merchant. which is
Yeah.
essentially what a chargeback is.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting, isn't it, that there's been no real innovation. I mean, I do like Apple Pay from a consumer point of view. That's easy. Um, I don't know, actually, thinking it through, whether because it's Apple Pay and you've had to use Face ID, whether that means it's much harder to get the charge back for fraud on the other end or not. Um, but I think it's an industry like that almost feels like it's rife for something quite interesting to come along and solve a lot of the problems around chargebacks and fraud. Because whilst credit cards work on the whole for most people most of the time, it's still there's still quite a big chunk of profits which disappear thanks to them, right?
so Apple Pay is a good example of a way, and I use Apple Pay constantly.
Mm,
It's just the easiest, whether you're on your desktop or your laptop or your phone. You hit that button. I put the fingerprint thing on my keyboard, or I double click the side of my phone, and it's finished. But let's just assume for an example, you bought something on Apple Pay. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's just say it's a
yeah.
bottle of diet pills or something along those lines. And they either don't arrive, or they show up and you take them for a week and they make you sick. Whatever it is, you decide you want your money back. And let's just say, for example, that you've got 3 or 4 different cards that are on your Apple Pay, and you can't remember which one you used.
Mm,
So there's two things that there's one thing that you know for sure: you're not unhappy with the product and you want your money back. But then there's this whole, sort of complex issue that you have. Am I calling Apple? Not calling physically, but am I
mm,
going on to Apple Pay and trying to figure out how to dispute it from there? Do I dive down into my card, whichever one it is that I used, assuming that I can figure that out? And on
mm,
Apple Pay specifically, there's no central, I talked earlier about,
mm,
working from the same set of information. There's no list of your transactions on Apple Pay. You have to go into
right.
each individual card to find out,
Yeah.
what you've done on that card.
Mm,
Or do you call the merchant? And if you call the merchant, how do you tell them that you paid?
yeah.
And so you're faced with a situation where you don't even really know what to do. You'll know that you want your money back, but you don't really have a clear path,
Mm,
to getting your refund. Um, so sometimes we solve problems on the front end, like how do I make it easier for Matt to buy, some diet pills or whatever it is. But I add a bunch of complexity on what happens if Matt is unhappy.
yeah.
So yeah, it what we're dealing with right now, I think, is more complex just because of those kinds of things. PayPal's the same thing. They were the
Mm,
first ones. And then with PayPal, they've got a PayPal credit, which is a line of credit within PayPal that doesn't even link to a card. Now what do I do?
yeah.
I still owe PayPal the money.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting because and there's a multiple of these now coming out. Like in the UK, we've got Klarna, the buy over four interest-free payments thing or whatever it is, and it's never interest-free. But that aside, but it's one of those where I can see the problem, and I mean I can see from my own data the problem, and I suppose as a merchant, the easiest and best thing I can do, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jeff, is to make sure it's easy for customers to come and get refunds. So the system that we have, a customer will email us or call us, and we need to give them a refund. They don't even need to remember the card that it was on, because the payment provider has remembered the card and just sends it back to it, and it's all fairly straightforward. They're not complaining to the bank. I'm not getting into trouble anywhere else. And I've got somebody who's satisfied with the customer service, right? They're kind of
Hmm.
like, well, this is good customer service. So that
Hmm.
strikes me maybe as the best way to deal with these things. Um, but it would be interesting to also think about the amount of times we would have had orders, and 2 weeks later the bank says, oh, that was a fraudulent transaction, and claws the money back, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, we did the base checks, why are we being penalized for this?
Hmm.
And I loved what I was reading through your information, Jeff. Actually, we obviously, like I do with that guess, I just want to know what I'm talking about. Um, there was this really interesting phrase that you use called friendly fraud,
Hmm.
and how this has become a behavioral issue, not just a criminal one. I'm really curious, what do you mean by friendly fraud?
So I guess the first differentiation for friendly fraud is that it's not, systemic or criminal fraud, right? It's not a ring of people that are sort of traipsing the global e-commerce world,
Yeah.
trying to, steal things, in order to sell them, or something along those lines. It is simply, um, and a lot of this really increased significantly during the pandemic. Um, I got something, I'm perfectly happy with it, but I know I can call my bank and uh, tell them a different story, and they
Mhm.
will give me my money back and take it from the merchant. um, we've there have been, literally hundreds of surveys, and we have access to a lot of data around this. The vast majority of friendly fraud is not even what we would call intentional. It's not something that when you're buying the item, you necessarily are deciding at that moment that I'm going to get
Mhm.
my money back for this anyway. It's something that maybe is a little more expensive than you should have bought in the first place. A bill
Yeah.
comes in that you weren't expecting, your things are a little tight. Maybe, I mean, this is one of 10,000 scenarios. And you say, you
Mhm.
know what? I'm just going to call my bank and tell them I didn't get it. And they'll give me my money back and it'll be fine. There's nothing that you can do. I was in the fraud prevention business, was, part of my career. I started out in the payment gateway business, and I sold that company to a British company that was one of the initial leaders of e-commerce fraud.
Mhm.
And really, there's very little that we could have done then, or that you can do now, to determine that friendly fraud, is now or eventually going to happen. It's just
Mhm.
something that is largely behavioral, and there's nothing you can only really deal with it on the back end. When somebody has made the decision that they want their money back, what are you
Mhm.
going to do about it? The issue that merchants have with friendly fraud is not that, oh well, geez, I don't want to give them their money back, because unfortunately the cards are stacked against them. The issuers will refund their money. If you call your issuer, they've made it very easy in most cases. Your When I say call, I mean there's a dispute button, next to almost every transaction. Like, you go onto your Amex app, there's literally,
Yeah.
every single transaction, just a little button that you hit.
Yeah.
Okay, give me my money back. So they've made it very easy on consumers. Um, and so as a merchant, one of the things that you have to figure is, okay, well, I've got X% of friendly fraud that I'm going to be dealing with as a business. How do I want to deal with it? Do I want to just give them the money back and limit the expense and the exposure and the time that we consume on these things? Or do I want to go the other way and, fight and deal with the bank and all the rest of that stuff? And the issue generally for our customers comes down to the economics.
Mhm.
You wind up making about the same number of refunds anyway. The expense of having to deal with the bank and the chargeback and all of the rest of that stuff can be 6, 7, 8 times as much
Mhm.
as, using a system like ours. Which, I say a system like ours, I mean, we have really the only one right now. But just say, okay, well, look, it's 1% of my transactions. These people are going to get their money back one way or the other. Let's just give them the money back.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's friendly fraud. It's so, but it sounds so soft and palatable.
Right.
But it's also quite distasteful, isn't it? And I get it. I understand it from both. And this is where I think actually your idea of having a shared set of data would be really interesting. Because if I could, when I took your credit card details, when I took your order, if there was a system where I could somehow go and check and say, well, Jeff, actually, no, he's a good guy. He's got a bias score of 98%. Like, Jeff, I'm sending this out to you tomorrow. But Estella over here, and I'm sorry if your name's Estella, by the way. It's
Right.
had to pick a random name. But if you're Estella over here, and actually there's a little check on your name because you do quite a lot of these chargebacks, a lot of these disputes. You've only got a score of like 30. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to send these to you, Estella. I think I'd rather not actually take the risk. I can see why a central repository of data that I, as a merchant, could access and that everybody could access, I think would be a really interesting thing. I appreciate that just by suggesting that, there will be hordes of people up in arms around privacy and all that sort of stuff. But I like you. I go, well, we're just going to have X amount percent refunds every year, and so we just have to account for that in our costings. It is what it is. It's not brilliant. It's not. And there are some people who genuinely need a refund, and there are some people who are taking the mick, and you can't distinguish them. And you go, you're right. The economics are just so bad. Why would I want to fight them on this?
I think if you wake up, so we're in January 5th, right? I mean, really probably the first business day of the year. And I'm an e-commerce merchant and I'm going to do, $10 million in sales this year. And I know that that I'm going to have, 250 or $300,000 in what I would call disputes, right? Like friendly fraud, chargebacks, whatever it is. The question is, how much of a penalty do I want to pay on top of that $250,000? And how can that penalty exacerbate itself, right? Because if the percentage is too high, I wind up getting all of these additional fees and fines, and it tumbles pretty quickly into something that becomes unmanageable. And the acquiring banks and the sponsor banks out there have got a very low tolerance threshold at this point. And so you could literally get yourself into a situation where, I mean, we were actually joking around about this last night, one of my partners and I. I mean, imagine your bank calling you up and threatening to shut your business down because only 98% of your customers were perfectly happy with what they bought, right? I mean, imagine if a politician had to deal with those kinds of stats. Nobody, every elected official would be gone their first week.
Well, yeah, there'd be no government, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Right. So, but those are the actual thresholds. I mean, if you've got 2% chargebacks as a merchant, you're in big trouble. Not only is it costing you a fortune, $25, $35, $55 per transaction, and imagine somebody who's selling something that costs $25. Having $75 in fees and fines, on each of their transactions. Now a $250,000 problem is $1 million problem. And you've got a sponsor bank potentially pointing a gun at your head. And it is we're largely in a sort of blame the merchant. It's always been a little bit blame the merchant, right? Like if somebody, but I'm 58 years old, and I was, I was around at the very beginning of e-commerce, and I remember very vividly how difficult it used to be to charge something back. I mean, if you called up your bank and said, hey, these guys didn't deliver this, or I'm unhappy with it, or there's some big problem, they would send you this reef of papers, and like every other paper would basically say you're going to be arrested immediately if any of this doesn't turn out to be true. You felt like you really, I mean, you felt like you were taking your life in your hands a little bit, and it was going to take a month to resolve and all the rest of that. None of that exists anymore. Like I said, everybody's built a little dispute button, and you answer a couple of questions, they give you your money back, and they sort it out with the merchant, and they go back to the merchant and say, well, you must be running a terrible business if people are unhappy. And that's just how the world has turned. One of the systemic issues that we have, I think, is that there's a lot more money in the issuing business than there is in the processing business. And so, the issuers all have a much, much greater economic opportunity keeping their cardholders happy than the processors or the merchants have, on a one by one transaction basis.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean, you
that's
can see why they favor the customer.
Yeah.
That's where their money is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had it explained to me by a very large merchant. We were there's a show in the U.S. called Money 2020, which is sort of
Mm,
the mecca for, payments and fintech and stuff.
mm,
And that was in October, and I was talking to a guy who runs a very, very large, sort of premium issuing portfolio for one of the major card brands in the U.S. And he said, "Listen, Jeff, we know what's going on. We know when Matt calls up and says, he doesn't like this $200 thing or whatever. He's probably perfectly fine with it, but
mm,
we don't care.
mm.
Matt's spending $17,000 a month. We're getting premium interchange on all that money.
Yeah,
He's rolling about half of that into the next month, and we're getting, almost leg breaking interest rates,
yeah,
from him on that. And we just want Matt to be happy. We don't give us
yeah,
we don't care if he wants to steal something worth $200 every other month.
yeah. That's
It's
your
fine
problem.
with us. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
deal with it.
Because it's definitely not my problem, says the bank, right? It's not my
That's right.
problem. It's your problem.
Yeah, but the
And
bank
I
is
don't
going
care.
to say, Matt, you called the right people. You
Yeah,
have no problems.
yeah, exactly.
we'll
And I get that.
we'll sort it.
Yeah. It's just a danger of free market economics, isn't it? In many ways, that the bank's going to go where the money's go. And no one's crying out for the merchants. It's not like the government's going to go and introduce new law to protect the merchants. I think all that's going to happen is the merchants are going to do what we do now. We're going to go, well, there's this percentage. We're going to have to put prices up so the consumer ends up paying more anyway. Um, Thanks to people that maybe abuse the system slightly. It's one of those, isn't it? I've talked to a lot of people about this, and everybody you speak to, and Jeff, maybe it's interesting with the business that you're in, because I can imagine that every customer that you have on using your software solution is probably using it because they're really angry with at least one of their customers doing something illegal and getting away with it, and there's nothing that they can do. They almost feel powerless, right? Um, what's your counsel to people that feel that way? Just suck it up and get on with it.
We joke around about having to have it like a staff psychiatrist, in our customer service
Mm,
department, because it really is terribly frustrating for
mm,
these merchants, right? Because at the end of the day, we really only have one thing to say: just give them their damn money back, right?
yeah,
I mean, they're gonna get it anyway.
yeah,
And I know it's painful. It's sort of like, I mean, if you removed all of the emotion from the legal system, how many lawyers would lose their job tomorrow, right? I mean, there are so many people out there spending, $400, $500, $700 an hour on lawyers to fight something that they probably won't win anyway, just
mm,
because they want to feel like they're right, and they want to feel like, it's not right, it's not moral and ethical for me to give up. But at the end of the day, there's just a practical view of all of this. And like I
mm,
said, you have $250,000 in people that are going to want their money back legitimately or not. Do you want that $250,000 to cost you an extra 50,000 in fees, or do you
mm,
want it to be 800,000?
mm.
Like, how much of your sort of moral and ethical balance comes into sustaining your profit margins? Um, I don't know. I mean, if I assume there's a lot of people that run e-commerce businesses that are listening to this, and so they're all very familiar with the Visa monitoring program, and the Visa and Mastercard in 2025 significantly tightened, and lowered the thresholds for almost everything, and changed some of the rules significantly, and there's sort of additional fees and fines now that are in place. And we, I mean, the sponsor banks that we work with directly have removed thousands of merchants from
Yeah,
their customer bases, because they were acting exactly the way that they were prior. But when you lower the threshold, and you change the rules, then sometimes the rules say, well, it was perfectly fine for you to do this before. It's like changing the speed limit on a highway, right? So it used to be 70, and we changed it to 55, and there's a bunch of people that don't realize it's 55, but you can still get pulled over and get a ticket for going 75.
Yeah.
And so, frankly, we're in this business right now because we're also in the acquiring business. We've got large portfolios of merchants, some of whom are in, what Visa and MasterCard would call high risk businesses, nutrition, supplements, e-gaming, all sorts of stuff like that. And we needed a solution for them because they were under pressure.
Mm.
They were coming to us and saying, look, I can't get below 1%. I can't do it. There's too many people that are stealing from me. There's too much confusion in the market. Like, if you're telling me I'm going to lose my business unless I lower it, below this, we don't know what we're going to do. And one of our partners actually came to us with the original product, the original quick refund product that they had built in response to the Federal Trade Commission's click to cancel law, which took several years to pass, which wound up getting, sort of crushed, in lawsuits just before it was supposed to launch. But the idea was, and we talked about this at the start, if it's super easy to pay for something, it should also be super easy to cancel it or get your money back. And so the original quick refund product was built in response to that because, the FTC said all these merchants are going to need a solution that makes it just as easy to get your money back as it was to pay. That lawsuit went away. And in the middle of all of this, Visa and MasterCard significantly tightened, the thresholds by which you're judged as a merchant and changed some of the rules and started, fining them for things that they didn't previously. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but it's become a significant problem. And when I was first introduced to it, because I didn't think of it, I thought, making refunds easier. Well, why didn't somebody? Isn't somebody already doing that? I mean, it seems so simple, right? But nobody did. Right. Nobody did. And when you said earlier, you said, obviously the smartest and easiest thing is to just, sort of let the processor deal with it, right? Just refund it back to the original card and everybody moves on. That's actually not what happens in most of the cases with refunds. Most refunds are a forced deposit in the same amount back to either the original payment method or another one. And then the bank has to sort of match those up. It's not, you're not actually doing anything. You're not affecting a refund based on the original transaction. You're producing a new one in the same amount, in the opposite direction. But I think something like 25% of all chargebacks are transactions that have actually already been refunded, believe it or not. Okay. But the bank didn't match them up. Right. So, you get something in the mail. So let's just say that, make it easy so there's no shipping or anything. You need to do a presentation, and you've seen this AI tool on Instagram that makes it look like, well, I'm just going to throw my logo and a couple of declarative sentences in, and I'm going to get this thing that looks like a $50,000 television commercial. Mm-hmm. So you buy it or you subscribe to it. You can't figure it out. It's not intuitive. You don't know what to do with it. And you want your money back. Well, it's not that. Maybe it's been a couple of weeks and the company goes, yeah, great, $19.95, here's your money back, Matt. They just do a forced deposit onto your card. But a forced deposit sometimes takes days. Sometimes it can take a week. Depends on where the company is. You randomly checking your bank app. You go, I don't see this $19.95. I'm not calling those guys back again. I'm going to call my bank. So you call the bank or you dispute it online. These transactions are 2 weeks apart, the forced deposit and the original transaction. They don't catch it. They also process a refund on top of that, maybe give the merchant their money back again and a $25 fine or a $35 fine. And if there's enough of those, there could be another fine for $8 or $10. And if there's enough of those, they could wind up with $20,000, $30,000 a month in just some arbitrary amount that they decide to charge the merchant because there's too many. So it tumbles pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it's at a very, very low threshold. When I got into this business, the threshold for chargebacks was 3.5%. Then they changed it to 1, and everybody figured it out. Now it freaked out. Now it's going down to 0.5%.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine
Crazy.
your bank accusing you of being a failure because only 99.5% of your customers are happy.
It's like the dad who says to his son, when his son comes and says, "Dad, I got 99.5% on my test. Well done." Instead of saying well done, he's like, "Well, what happened to the other half?"
What did you get wrong?
Yeah. I just want to punch you in the face right now, Dad. It's one of those, isn't it? And it feels like, as an e-commerce operator, that we're kind of at the mercy of all of this. It's not like we can just all sort of band together and change the outcome. We just kind of have to deal with it, right?
Well, that's right. And then, so you've got Visa and MasterCard. You've got the sponsor banks on both, the acquiring and the issuing side, the processors and acquirers, the merchants. And then you've got all of these third parties, right? So you've got front end fraud prevention vendors that are going to try to tell you as a merchant what's good and what isn't good, before you accept the transaction in the first place. That was the business that I was in when I was, working in the UK. And then there are a whole bunch of companies that help you to sort of manage the chargebacks, that will provide you with alerts. If you hit the dispute button, for example, on your bank app, and the first question is always, have you contacted the merchant? Because they won't give you your money back if you haven't at least attempted or claimed to have attempted to get to contact the merchant. And you say that, no, I haven't, and they say, well, get in touch with the merchant. And again, this is all digital. Well, that results in a bunch of these companies sending the merchant an alert. Hey, Matt's upset, he hasn't charged anything back. Guess what? That alert's going to be $35. Right? So even if they jump on the phone with you and resolve it, it still costs them $35.
Yeah.
Just because they went to the bank first.
Yeah.
So to your point exactly. I mean, these merchants are all, and we're in that business. We've got large portfolios of merchants who we process for, and they are definitely feeling like they're in a much smaller box now than they were. And I think the biggest problem for everybody eventually is going to be in that they're in a lot less profitable box. Mm-hmm. So when regulations or the Visa MasterCard thresholds change or tighten, when banks and acquirers start to get more aggressive about cleaning these things up, and with fees and fines, and sometimes just eliminating the merchant accounts altogether, everybody gets into this survival mode, right? And it's sort of like, well, as long as I survive, I'm fine. And I think everybody's largely been in that, sort of like they're on a raft in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
But I think, by the time we hit, spring, summer of this year, there's going to be a lot of people that sort of put their head up and say, well, yeah, we survived, but we're not making any money anymore. Right? These, all of these, tightened restrictions and everything else are costing us a fortune with the same number of disputes as we had before. And so that's again, I think that's part of how we're not solving the problem, right? I mean, we're not going to tell you, the merchant, well, you've got $250,000 in friendly fraud or any other kind of fraud, and we're going to prevent it. We're telling you that we're going to limit your exposure based on what that is. We're going to facilitate, an easy refund, and it's going to cost you less money. And all of these, sort of black marks that you get on your record with Visa and MasterCard and the banks and so forth disappear because you've resolved it on your own. Nobody else is involved. So if we can take care of, if the problem is you're at 2% and you need to get to 1%, and we get you there, not only are your costs lowered, obviously by a bunch, but the thresholds by which your business is judged by Visa, MasterCard, the sponsor banks, and so forth is also much cleaner. And so you're making more money, but you also, to those third parties look like, a much, cleaner, better business.
Yeah.
So it's a real, you get into the weeds on this stuff, and it's easy to get despondent. I mean, I deal with merchants all the time that are like, I just can't, like, this is insane. But sometimes there's an easier solution than you think there was going to be. We own the product, and we're as surprised as anybody that that it didn't exist in the first place. The analogy that I started using, right, because everybody was like, well, isn't that already around somewhere? I mean, it seems like it would, that would already exist. It seems like an obvious thing that somebody would have done a million years ago. And I say maybe this is more of a U.S. thing, but I mean, it took 78 years for the Postal Service to turn the stamp into a sticker.
Okay, that's a stat I'm going to use. I'm going to quote you there, Jeff. I'm not going to lie. I love that. Well, no, but I listening to you talk, right? It sounds to me like the smart play here is for merchants to go, you know what, guys? We are going to get royally shafted with chargebacks, right? It is what it is. It's inevitable. We can lower the amount of chargebacks and refunds by being smart. And the refunds and chargebacks that we have, we can do those well to, again, lower the charges. So the smart play is not necessarily to go to your local councillor or senator or wherever you're in the world and complain. The smart play is to go, how do I minimize loss?
Yeah, right. That's right.
How do I make I acknowledge there's going to be loss. I don't think it's fair. It doesn't matter whether it's fair. There's going to be some loss. How do you minimize it, and how do you move on? And that sounds like the smart play, doesn't it, when it comes to dealing with customers that use credit cards to buy from your website?
I have to that point exactly, and it's not an e-commerce issue, but I think it's a good analogy. So one of our clients also owns / owned 150 odd sort of hypermarkets, you would call them in the UK, in urban areas. And in the U.S. in particular, they owned I think 40 or 50 in New York City. And they ended up shutting them down because there's always going to be shoplifting. People are always going to, grab some stuff and go. And their original solution was to put security guards, to just prevent it, not necessarily to stop anybody, because believe it or not, here in the U.S. you can't stop anybody. You put your hands on somebody who's just stolen a candy bar, and you got a, multi, $20,000-$30,000 lawsuit on your hands. But just as a prevention, right? I'm just going to have a guy standing there who's going to make it seem like it's not a good idea. The insurance rates increased so much in each of these stores in New York that if the shoplifting had doubled, it still wouldn't have been as expensive as preventing it with one guy standing at the front. And I think that's sort of symbolic of what we're looking at, right? I mean, nobody wants to say, yeah, okay, just go ahead and take the stuff. We'll make it easy on you just so it's easier on us. But at the end of the day, those are the pragmatic decisions that we have to make, particularly at volume, at scale.
Makes total sense. I love this idea, I suppose, of understanding it, of e-commerce shoplifting. I think is a really interesting idea. Very good. Jeff, listen, I'm aware of time, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the conversation, but how do people reach you? How do they connect with you if they want to do that? What's the best way to find out more?
So our website is www.getquickrefund.com. There's a bunch of information on there. There's a contact us form that you can fill out. You can also email info@quickrefund.ai, and those are two completely different domains. We actually I got the AI domain because I thought it was really cool, and we built the platform on it. And then my IT guy said, "You can't run email off this thing, Jeff. We're actually running the platform here." So we got a different one for the website. So info@quickrefund.ai. Anybody can reach us there. And if you would like to just learn more about Quick Refund, you can go to getquickrefund.com.
Wonderful. We will, of course, link to that in the show notes as well. And you can click those links. And, of course, if you sign up to the newsletter, they'll be in your email inbox. But, of course, whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, or whether you're on YouTube or whatever, just scroll down. It will all be in the description as well. We'll make sure all those links are in there. But, Jeff, thank you, man, for coming on the show. Genuinely loved the conversation. Learned a lot.
It's my pleasure.
Take it all so seriously. It's probably just, don't get so angry, man. It's probably the best bit of advice. One of the things that we do like to do in the last 2 minutes, Jeff, we like to do this thing called saving the best till last. So those that have stuck around to the end, what is your top tip for someone specifically starting out in e-commerce, who's kind of new to e-commerce, who's listening to you talk, going, man alive, I've still got to find a good supply for the products. I'm getting a little bit lost with it all. What's your top tip for them? The mic is yours for the next 2 minutes, Jeff. Over to you.
So my top tip for anybody, and we deal with all sorts of merchants of digital goods, physical goods, and things like that. The most important thing, and what prevents us, frankly, from ever having to get involved, is around fulfillment and customer service. Whether you're providing somebody with a downloadable digital good, or you're shipping them, a sweater, or a pair of shoes or something like that. Getting your product to your customer as quickly as possible and over communicating with them through that process. The number of disputes, refunds, and things that we see on a daily basis that are based on a lack of communication from the merchant is something that every single merchant can easily solve in its entirety. It's just in that specific case, there's all sorts of stuff that we can't control. And that's the world that I live in, most of the time. But what you can control, literally down to the last item, it just takes, discipline and organization, is, fulfillment and customer service. Get your goods out, over communicate with your clients, follow up to make sure they got what they got and that they're happy with it and so forth. And because the number of disputes and refunds and chargebacks and things that I've seen through my entire career, I'd say there's a large percentage, maybe 25, 30%, that are based on confusion or frustration or lack of communication. And those, if you can just solve those problems, forget about refund versus chargeback or anything else. If you can just, make sure that your stuff arrives on time, and if it doesn't, just communicate about it. And I think that will eliminate a huge percentage of what we have to deal with on the back end.
Fantastic. Love that. And it puts the power back in your hands, doesn't it? This is what I can control. This is what I can do. Don't try and shaft your customer, because you'll always come off worse, it seems. But go out there, do a good job, over deliver, and you'll find these things go, further and further down. Jeff, loved it, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute treat, my friend.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, there you go. Another fabulous episode of the e-commerce podcast, all wrapped up and handed to you on the metaphorical silver plate, of course. But thank you for joining us this week. Make sure you come back next week, because we've got more great conversations lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. So make sure you do all the like and subscribe thing. But that's it from me. That's it from Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.